How many copies did you have printed?
3,000.
Did you sell them all?
No. No.
The price on this $24.95?
Yes.
Would you mind telling the audience what the whole project cost you?
Well, I probably could have bought a Mercedes or something.
I mean, would it have been under 20 or did?
Oh no, it was more like 35, 40,000.
And then what happened after the book came out? When?
It came out in March, early in March.
And how did you get it distributed?
You sign up with distributors, midpoint distributors, and then they send it off to people like Ingram Books, and they have it now, and it's in all their warehouses, and it is now available in most of the Barnes & Nobles and Borders and so forth, and it's beginning to sell. So
you had the mayor of Fort Wayne, Indiana, send a copy to the president.
Yeah.
And, did he ever get back to you, by the way, on this, the mayor?
Oh, we see each other, yes. We belong to a club. He just gave a paper the other day on avant-garde, and our Quest Club in Fort Wayne, we're very proud of that. It's been on, about 85 years now, and once a week we give papers on all kinds of topics, and I gave some of my papers on the presidents there, and I just saw the mayor the other day, and we talked about the president and the fact that this had occurred.
So the book came out, and then the president, did anything happen on sales before the president acknowledged it in the news conference?
Well, I was on CNN's World Wide Web the night of the election.
How'd that work?
That was fun. I was out in San Francisco by coincidence, and we had over 1 million hits.
How did you get asked to be on the web?
I have a marketing firm that put me on that. And then the next day, because it went so well, I was on CNN, Ask CNN.
So where were you in San Francisco? Physically, I mean, were you on?
At CNN headquarters.
In San Francisco?
Yes. Yeah.
And people were transmitting their questions to you?
Mm-hmm.
And you would answer them?
Yes.
And you had over 1 million hits?
Yes, it was fun. Yes, and then we had an interview, about a 3-minute interview on the web and politics, which went on the worldwide CNN network. In fact, someone called me sitting in a hotel room in Tel Aviv, and he says, there's Al Zacher. I mean, he just really was, when he got back, he called me. So it's getting some notoriety.
So the next day you went on CNN Network?
Yes.
To do what?
Well, it's called Ask CNN, and we had a call-in show. We talked with the interviewer about the second term, and then interweaved it with some questions that came in.
Then what happened next to you to get visibility?
Well, and then I was on Politics with Chris Matthews for a half hour, and that was a lot of fun also. That was very interesting.
Now, as you're going through all this, what's your feeling about it? What's your feeling about the process? Is this a hard, I mean, kind of talk to others that might be interested in doing the self-publishing of a book. Are you, first of all, let me ask you, are you surprised how much attention it's gotten?
Well, I felt that it was a topical subject, and I worked very hard toward the end of last year to finish the book. I didn't have Nixon done at all a year ago, and I started out the beginning of last summer to write Nixon, and that really pressured me. And then I didn't have my conclusion done, so that there was a lot of pressure to get this out, but I did it intentionally for the election. In fact, I almost thought of trying to get it done for Bush's potential second term, and that didn't, of course, work out. But I think the most important issue is the dedication to writing the book. That's first. I think the self-publishing aspect is interesting and going on more and more. I think, there are 25 or 30,000 books being self-published now. It's some large number. I could even be understating that. But the important ingredient is to have a book you care about. And that's one of the elements of this. I was devoted to the subject from the very beginning. It excited me. It was something that I found totally absorbing.
How did you go about making sure that you didn't make a historical mistake?
Oh, of course, I'm sort of a nut about that. I had a excellent tutorial at our local Indiana Purdue campus and worked with Professor Barkey over all the years of writing. He checked, he worked with me on accuracy. He's quite knowledgeable about the presidency. And then I had 6 others editing, and I had someone who's expert in grammar and syntax. And I thought I was good at that, but I found out I wasn't. This was written and rewritten over and over again to make sure that all aspects were covered. And I've only found 1 or 2 obvious mistakes. I think some experts out there might find some glaring errors. I had Calvin Coolidge giving a presidential address in 1921, but other than that, I haven't found any. I reread the book for this session, and I found just a couple of things I didn't like, but...
I found one tiny error in the list of the ages of people when they became president.
Oh.
And you might correct me if I'm wrong, but you have Theodore Roosevelt being 43, and I think he was 42, because...
Okay, yeah.
Did you do that chart yourself?
I put it together from another source. I'll have to double-check that. That's interesting.
Because people are always asking who the youngest...
Oh, yeah.
If my calculations are right, that Bill Clinton will be the youngest president by a few months, only after U.S. Grant, to have served 2 terms, if everything works out all right?
Yeah.
Does youth have anything to do with whether he will be successful or not?
Well, I think it'd be totally irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. I think it would have no factor whatsoever. I do think the times in which you serve make a difference, some difference. And that was referenced in the Schlesinger article. There's no question that if you have a great war to fight, that you can be far more momentous a leader than if you don't. And Teddy Roosevelt always regretted the fact that he didn't have some war. But I think he used the White House quite effectively. Eisenhower would probably be an example of a president who had such quiet times that I think that's one reason he isn't judged to be more effective. And the other is, of course, this whole hidden hand approach, which a historian presented, Greenstein presented, and of course I totally agree with that. He had a legislative agenda, and he allowed Lyndon Johnson to take full credit for most of his programs. And he also acted the sort of, loving, grandfatherly type, little bumbling, playing golf, great chief of state, but certainly not a dramatic leader. The fact is, behind the scenes, he was brilliant. He wrote many of his own legislative proposals, understood all the agendas that were there, and had complete involvement with the government, including foreign and domestic affairs, but never cared to have this as a public aspect of his career. And it was hard to judge him for that reason.
What about, because you talk some about this through your book, what impact do you think the continuing discussion about scandal will have in the second administration of Bill Clinton, based on what you know from past experience?
Well, there's been very little in American presidential history on the subject. Grant, never accused of being involved in any of the scandals, but it severely diminished his second term. There was one flare-up in the first term, Credit Mobilier, but he was completely separated from that. But in the second one, major people, major members of his administration were involved in graft and stealing, in diverting funds, lost their jobs, went to jail, and he simply, it diverted attention from his administration, an administration that was not heading anywhere anyway. So it's unclear what effect graft or whatever, dishonesty, immorality, would have on a president who had an agenda. The only other one we have with any relevance is Harding, and Harding died, that was his first term, and he died. And of course Richard Nixon, where there was a smoking gun and near impeachment, and I don't hear any such rumors as that. we hear all more stories similar to those of the Grant administration. And it'll be interesting to see. I think we just have to wait and find out whether there's evidence. And if there is, then will it impact an activist president? The other experience we have is Grant, who is not involved in promoting those programs in which he actually did have some belief.
On the back of your book, you have this endorsement from this Elliot Bartkey,
Yes.
who you worked with. He says, "Trial and Triumph is a testimony to the endurance and possibility of democratic leadership. Zacher brings a fresh perspective that the experts have long ignored." What's the fresh perspective?
I suppose, number one, and this is my own view, and I'm not sure quite what he meant, and that is, I have three conclusions. And the first one is that the presidency, the qualifications, the qualities of success have not changed. And I also feel, and this is kind of a new perception, but I think it does, that I claim the American people haven't changed. Going back to what I consider really the prevailing document, the controlling document, and that's the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. They have certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I think the founders defined the pursuit of happiness as economic security. And it didn't say happiness, it said the pursuit of. So I believe that the founding fathers were arguing for equal opportunity, equality and equal opportunity. And I think that theme has been carried throughout the American history. I think those presidents who understood this and who applied reasonable solutions to achieving equal opportunity for Americans, starting with Jefferson, who felt that Hamilton was going to overrun the average farmer in this case, that what was needed was getting Hamilton out of the way and too much government out of the way, and then you'd have equal opportunity, less government. So, well, by the time Teddy Roosevelt came along, and industry had such great power, and wealth had such great power, and the common man did not, equality again, and equality of opportunity. Not equality, but equality of opportunity. That Teddy Roosevelt used government to try to implement that. Woodrow Wilson did the same thing, all with the same original founding fathers' objectives, but using different tools.
Have you had equality of opportunity in your life?
Yes, I certainly think so.
Where were you born?
Bay City, Michigan.
How long did you live there?
I left for college when I was 18. Yes, and really never returned. I went to Antioch College, where they sent us out on jobs. Then I was in Korea, serving in the Corps of Engineers near the front lines during the war, and came back to Michigan, got a master's degree in economics.
And Antioch College is located where?
Yellow Springs, Ohio.
What did you study there?
Economics.
What got you interested in economics and then going on and getting a master's degree?
Oh, I think it was a practical side of history. I always, in my world today, I sort of live in a practical world and a dream world, I guess, a little bit of both, and that fitted it. It's both worlds.
What took you to Fort Wayne?
Well, I had a family activity business there that I was interested in.
What did you start out doing in your business?
It was a retail activity.
What kind?
It was women's haberdashery, women's hats.
How long did you do that?
For about 4 years.
Then
I
what?
sold that and went into real estate.
Now, were you interested in the presidency that early in your life?
Oh, I've always been interested in it. And you asked me before, was I involved in politics? But I've always been deeply interested in politics. So that, yes.
Over the years, have you done anything special about following presidents in any way? I mean, did you keep track of them and any kind of research material up until the time you started working on the book?
No, not at all. Just, I suppose, I read everything, and I would read the lives of presidents and look into biographies and that sort of thing.
Do you have a favorite president in history?
Well, I mentioned before
George Washington.
that, yes, but I'm very intrigued by James Madison, and I say the Schlesinger article, they played him down, but Franklin Roosevelt, certainly somebody that was very intriguing, and I liked my chapter on Franklin Roosevelt. He had a lot of faults, but there's no question that he saved the American economy. He saved the way of life, certainly in a halting, and the New Deal was not a success by the time the second term was over. And by the way, one disagreement I had with the article was that he was responsible for some major legislation at the end of the second term. It was Congress who took over, and one of my conclusions is that getting along with Congress, really the principal conclusion I had, is essential for a president to succeed. And if the president does not control Congress, Congress will control him, and by near the end of the second term, Congress had taken over the New Deal legislation that was the Hours Acts and those changes which occurred at the end of the second term were initiated by people like Wagner in Congress. Roosevelt was, of all things, more of a follower than a leader at that time.
At the end of each of your chapters, you have a reader's score of the particular president you've just written about. This one's Grover Cleveland. Defense, economic, I can't even see from here, communications, vision.
The ability to lead Congress.
What do you want people to do with this?
Oh, I think that was something that I discussed with one of the people I worked with the book, and you see, I'm a citizen historian. I think there are a whole bunch of history buffs and presidential junkies out there, and they all have their own opinions after reading the chapter. And I thought, well, there's a slight chance that they might want to argue with me, and I encourage that, so that I've asked people to send in their opinions. I don't think that's a principal aspect of the book.
Well, then in the back you have a chart that people can fill in,
Mm-hmm.
and what do you want them to do with it?
If they want to, they send it in.
Has anybody done that to you?
I've had some, yes.
Do they agree or disagree with your rankings?
Well, I've had some disagreement. It's interesting. In one review, I was absolutely trashed for my chapter on Andrew Jackson. And I don't know the press at all that did that. It must, I say so, it must be very, very liberal, because they criticized my favoring Jackson. Keep in mind, again, that the Schlesinger article and that survey still places Jackson among the near great. But Andrew Jackson violated Supreme Court directive, would not implement a Supreme Court directive to assist the Indians, Native Americans, in Georgia. And he forced their removal, the death of tens and tens of thousands of Indians. Well, by today's standards, looking at the perspective from today, he was a cruel, vicious reactionary. But in his time, that's what the majority of Americans wanted. He was fulfilling the wishes of the majority of Americans, and it was the common man, not large industry. He wasn't defending great wealth. He was defending the ordinary American citizen who wanted that land that the Indians had. And by standards of his day, he was their leader.
How much, did you ever total up the number of books you read to get ready to write this book of your own?
No. I'm sure there are an awful lot of them. I bought a lot of them, but I read a lot of them in the library and so forth. But I read a lot of books.
And having read all those books, did you find some that just stuck out as being ones that you'd recommend to your friends and they're particularly good?
Well, There's such a variety of them. Of course, the David Donald book on Lincoln, you have to mention that. And I'm kind of proud of the fact that my perspective on Lincoln is the same that he had, and his book, of course, came out way after my chapter on Lincoln. And it has a slight variation, and David Donald's book does also, on those perspectives of many historians prior to that on Lincoln. And that's one thing. It took a lot of courage on my part to take strong positions on each and every president, and I do that. There's no beating around the bush in what I think of each president. I don't think. It's very clear.
Well, let's go over some of these presidents. You give us your capsule feeling about them. In your chart in the back, you have special situations, Lincoln and Coolidge.